Welcome to the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux.
And once again, it's just us two for this week, but we have a lot of good stuff in store for you guys. And as always, we'll start off the episode with our quote of the week. And the quote for this week is, "Life is not about who you once were. It's about who you are now and who you have the potential to be." And the author is unknown on that one, but I like to start this conversation with looking back. So Glenn, so what has shaped the person that you are today? And I know that that's a loaded question,
Yeah.
but answer it whatever way you kind of see fit.
I would say what shaped me to the person I am today would probably be my upbringing. For people that don't know, I grew up in a 12 to 15 person household at any given time, right? You're talking about 3 to 4 families living in one single household. I didn't sleep in my first bed until I was probably 18 years old and I went off to college. I was sleeping on the floor or the couch or anywhere I can, find a space within the house. But it was always like a lot of love in my house, but it was just, we were all just trying to make it. So I think a lot of that had a lot to do with what I wanted to do in life, right? And what I wanted and what I didn't want. So for me, I was like, I never wanted to put myself in a situation where I had to find a place to sleep in the house.
Mhm.
Right? I wanted to designate a room. I wanted to designate a place to sleep. So I was like, I need something that's going to yield me enough money in order to do that. And then, a lot of that came from not having, man, and it shaped the person that I am today.
I think that growing up with lack, like both of us did, definitely gives you qualities, I will say,
Yeah.
that can help to propel you, because some people might not, adhere to those qualities, but that can help propel you to do great things. As you said, you have a strong motivator to never put yourself in a position where you had to look for somewhere to sleep. And I have my strong motivators as well, that guide me even to this day to achieve some of the things that I want to. So looking back at your upbringing, what is one takeaway, or one, like, let me put it like this: what would be one of the qualities that you developed or the lessons that you've learned that really stick with you even to this day?
I would say one of the lessons would be how to manage with less than what you have, right? And I think and let me just backtrack. I'm not saying that I was struggling for every meal or anything like that, but when you got 15 people in the house, it's hard to always have something there, right? And so you got to kind of manage with what you have. And I think that's the same thing that I kind of take into life. I'm able to have little, but be able to stretch it out. So I've used that in everything. I'm probably the cheapest person, just off of that.
Huh.
So even when it comes to saving money, I'm saving every little dime. I rather make my lunch than order out. And it's just those certain habits that, just from my childhood that I took all the way up into, my adulthood as well.
I actually agree with you, because I think that's something that I've learned as well. And I think that does translate pretty well when you do run your business. Like, because in the beginning stages of your business, you're not going to have all the resources that you want. You got that vision, but you got the drive to carry out that vision. But if you've been used to, in the past, of working with less than what you have, let's say for our photography business, we might not have the best camera, but
Right.
we're going to take some really good pictures, and then we're going to hit it heavy on that post production, so that you wouldn't even know that weren't using like the best type of equipment. So
Yeah.
I think when you are resourceful in that sense, it teaches you, one, to value those things once you do eventually get them, but it is also make you constantly search out different ways to be the best at what you are doing with what you currently have.
And you made a great point. Just making the best for what you have. And I look at you and I situation. You and me, we talk off camera a lot about
Yeah.
upbringing and stuff like that. And what's interesting is it's like those key things when we're growing up. and you're like, yo, it was that right there that kind of changed everything for me, right? Do you think that the environment that we live in and the circumstances that we are faced with, do you think that that kind of helps to motivate you to, to kind of push forward?
Um, yes and no. And I hate to like Jarnay say, be in that gray area right there,
Yeah,
but I think my environment growing up did show me that okay, this is your circumstances. Do you want to change it? And if you do, you're gonna have to put in some major work in order to do that. So the onus was always put on me to make the best out of whatever I have. But then there are certain things that serve as motivators to me. Some of them are
yeah.
selfish things that motivate me, but then there are other things like, family and, friends and things like that. But I will say like my environment, your environment teaches you. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, west side of Rockford, Illinois. So, I mean, we, like I mentioned before, weren't well off as a family. And I went to school. Okay, let me go back really quick. One of the things that I learned is that talent doesn't always mean that you're going to make it to what you want, or talent doesn't always mean that you're going to make it to where you want to be. And this is going to sound crazy. So, my freshman year, I played football for the first time for my high school. And we had so many talented individuals on there, like ridiculously amount of talented people, but we went 0 and 11. You know why?
Oh,
So we went 0 and 11. And that was a lesson right there that taught me like you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not executing, and that's where it comes down to those X's and O's. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not following instructions from the coaches, you're not being disciplined and learning the plays and things like that, another person or team who is less talented than you are can come through and do way more than what you're capable of doing. I will not even say capable of doing more than what you are doing because they are paying attention to those little details. And
agreed.
the same thing can happen in our businesses. Like you can be the most talented and creative individual, but I saw this quote that said talent plus lazy work ethic equals average. so so
Yeah,
it's like it's not really about what you have, it really is about what you do with what you have. And I will say that that's a lesson that I kind of learned early on, like being around so many creative and talented people
mhm,
that just didn't translate to results is what let me know like you got to be about that action.
yeah. And I think you made a great point. I think that's what I always thrived at is where people lack at, and that's work ethic. I mean, I remember, back in high school, dude, I didn't want to put in the work. And if I'm being transparent, I remember graduating high school, dude, with a 2.0 GPA. Right? I didn't even know what my GPA was because I was just not putting in the work. I was literally just going to class just to go to class and doing the bare minimum. Um, but it's when I decided, like, yo, if I really want to get somewhere in life, I have to put in more work. I had to put in that extra time, and that's kind of where that came from. Just like you said, if you just put in lazy work, you're going to become average. And I don't know anybody in my network or anybody that I'm close with that wants to be average. And I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that, you know, just doing the bare minimum is going to get you the bare minimum lifestyle. Period.
Exactly. And I mean, the exact same story. Like
Yeah.
in high school, I think I graduated with like a 2.5 GPA, maybe a
Congratulations. I would have been
2.5.
happy with that.
But see, the thing was, like me and my friends, and we weren't really challenged in high school for the most part. We were really good at taking exams, but we were lazy with those homework assignments, those in-class assignments, things like that. Because we knew like we can pass the exam. I'm not going to do all these little things. And similar to you, I didn't take education seriously until I had to pay for it myself. going
Hello.
to community college. That'll
Yeah.
wake you up. So it really is about doing the work. And if you do have that lazy work ethic, you're not going to really get far. I say the one thing that separates me from some other people, matter of fact, even taking a step back, I just had my graduation this past week, and I posted like a little thing to Facebook, thanking all the people who've helped me along the journey. And at the very end of it, I said, I'm not the smartest, I'm not the most intelligent, I'm not the brightest, I'm not the most creative person, whatever. But I did surround myself with people who believed in me. And at the end of the day, the only thing that separates me from somebody else is that I just didn't give up. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many people who could do so many great things, but as we talked about last week, they don't want to get on the treadmill,
Yeah.
or they
And
get off the treadmill when things gets tough.
yeah, and I think, and it brings into a quote, I think, and I may be just butchering this quote entirely, but I think Will Smith says something along the lines of, "You might look better than me, you might be smarter than me, but if we get on that treadmill, one thing that you're not going to do, you're not going to outwork me." And it really brings me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is that at what moment in your life, like that defiant moment, that you knew that like you wanted more. Like this having the bare minimum was just not enough.
Hmm. Um, there's actually a couple. Um, there is a couple. I will probably say okay. So I'll go with one. Um, the one that I would say that stands out the most to me was when I got that decline letter from Western.
Mm,
Um, as I mentioned on like our first podcast, I didn't start college until I was 21 years old. I was 18 after I graduated from college. I had a really decent job at the time, so I kept working, and then eventually I wanted to become a real estate appraiser, but that didn't work out. And the job that I was working at, I got promoted a few times. Due to the economy, the job closed down. So I'm like, I need to go to college. Like I'm still young enough. So I was like, I can try to get a degree. So
right.
at the age of 21, I applied to Western because that's where my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was going. And they denied me. And I remember getting a rejection letter and saying to myself, like, that this is crazy. Like how does this happen?
Yeah.
Because it's like as I mentioned before, me and my friends, we were all like really smart and we could do those exams, but we were lazy with the work, so that translated to a lower GPA. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to get serious about this. And looking back, that will probably be the most defining moment because it said what you were doing, it's not working. It really isn't.
Yeah.
If I would have got accepted when I originally applied to Western, I would have went to Western with those same lazy habits that I had in high school because it was working for you. So I think by getting denied, that helped to change my mindset completely because it's like, you know what? Those lazy tendencies aren't going to get you to that next level. And if you want to get
Hmm.
to that next level, it's going to require you to do something that you haven't done before.
Yeah. I would say my defining moment had to come from the education, field as well. It was more so in high school. I remember, funny story, right? So I remember going to my counselor and I had because this the first time I didn't even know what my GPA was. Like I really just want to make that clear. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't even know what a GPA was in itself, right? I went to my counselor, just senior year, just kind of checking in, trying to see where I'm at. And they say, "Yo, Glenn, you got and at the time it was like a 1.84 GPA, right? So this means that I mean I wasn't stupid or anything. I just didn't do the work.
Right.
I was in high school having fun, and then I saw all my friends around me start to apply to college. I'm like, yo, I thought we was just gonna chill after high school, right? Like so that's the mindset that I had at first. But like I said, I was trying to get ready to go to college, and well, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after high school. And I remember my counselor was like, "Yo, you got a 1.8 GPA. you're not going to graduate. And here I
Mm.
am, right? So I'm like, I'm not going to graduate. Like, what? So she's like, well, you have to get literally, I would have to get all B's and a couple A's in order to graduate. First off, I never had that many A's in all of high school outside of gym, right? So I was like, all right, what do I have to do? Uh, anyways, I put in the work, and I think for me, that defining moment of wanting more and didn't want to just settle was that, right? So I just started to go crazy, studying more than I ever did in my whole entire high school career, any of that. So I put in all that work, and I ended up getting the 2.0, right? And then I was like, yo, this just ain't enough. I don't want to just graduate high school. I want to do more of my life. And I applied to colleges, right? I got denied for most of them, but it was one of them that gave me a chance, and it was on what was called a second chance program.
Hmm.
And when I tell you, bro, once I took that program and they accepted me on a probationary period, I never looked back, man, and I did well.
Let me ask you, because
Okay.
the situation that you were just brought up about,
Mhm.
the your advisor, your counselor saying you're not going to graduate.
Yeah.
One of my friends had a very similar situation as well with one teacher. While we were in high school, she said, "You will not pass my class." And that's crazy, first and foremost,
Mhm.
for a teacher to tell a student, like, midway through. But that motivated him to pass the class. And
Yeah.
for me, the rejection letter motivated me to do better in college. And for you, your counselor saying you're not going to graduate it motivated
Now,
you.
let me interrupt. Not
Go
only
ahead.
did she tell me that I wasn't going to graduate, and she said that out of just looking at the grades. She wouldn't sign my transcripts. At this time, you had to have your transcript signed to send off to colleges by your counselor. She
Mm.
wouldn't sign anything. She told me verbatim, "You might as well go to a community college like my son did because you'll never get into a university. Just go ahead and work at a factory after or get a trade." Like she was like throwing down like all the low stuff that I can do. I was like, wow. Had I just listened to her, my life probably could have been, the total
And see,
opposite.
that's where my question is. So, what type of, well, for you as an
Yeah.
individual, do you get more motivated by people telling you that you can't do something, or
Yeah.
by people telling you, like, hey, man, you're doing great, or I see this in you, and like pumping you up that way?
Yeah. Don't gas me up. Cause I don't don't gas me up, man. Like, I mean, tell me, if it's real genuine, like motivation, like, hey bro, you can really do it, that's cool. But don't just gas me up to gas me up. But I get more motivated from the haters, man, or the people telling me that I can't do anything. Because for me, I just want to prove you wrong. So I'm always constantly trying to prove people wrong, even if they're not even doubting me. In my head, everybody's doubting me. So I'm constantly trying to, prove everybody wrong.
And see, I think I'm the same way, but then again, it's like I'm trying to prove myself right. And I think sometimes we just need something to motivate us, to keep us going. And I think as you get
Yeah.
older, as we're both husbands and fathers, you have another sense of motivation. Like,
Yeah.
you want to provide for your family or make sure that your kids have a better life than you had or have. So I think we're just always looking for those motivators. But I was just curious, if which ones has the louder voice for you? People saying
Uh,
negative things or people saying those positive things?
probably the negative, I guess I'm a little weird like that, man. I think I
uh,
feed off of that, man. People say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, or you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that because of your upbringing or because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm always trying to prove everybody wrong. But maybe that'll change one day. But I mean, my internal motivation is my family, man. My wife and my daughter. So nothing beats that or outweighs that at all.
And then, I mean, because like I said, we both have kids. Like, how important then is it for you to kind of, because you're an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and your wife, she has a business as well that she runs outside of working the 9 to 5. How important is it to have that entrepreneurial environment for your daughter to see?
It's very important because I always want to give her another option,
Mm.
right? And for me, like no matter what, she's going to go to school, right? I want her to get an education, but if she feels like this isn't something she wants to do, once she finish it, she can always go the entrepreneurial route, and I can help. guide her, and she knows what the results of being an entrepreneur is like. And then she once she finished school, she'll know exactly like what she can do with her degree. So kind of kind of feeding both of those things in the household is a must needed thing for me.
And see, the reason why I asked that question is because I'm not sure, like for you growing up, did your parents like put you
Mm.
in activities or things to help build certain skills that helped you to, or that you still use to like to this day? Like, were there any things like that?
As far as like entrepreneurship,
Yeah,
no,
or even
it
just
wasn't.
technical skills.
No, it really wasn't, man. It was more so me just seeing things, right? It
Hmm.
was me seeing like my father, because he owned multiple business. Like as farther,
Okay.
like as much as I can remember, my dad had like restaurants, beeper shops when they were in style.
Beeper shops.
Beeper shops, right? Right now, you know that's old, right? So that's he had those back in the '90s. He had restaurants, beauty shops, barber shops. I mean, any type of business, you name it, right? So for me, it was just about seeing those things, and that was my technical aspect. But nothing. I mean, I wasn't really fortunate enough to be put in those activities where it kind of fostered type of skill, like any type of skill set that I had. You know, anything outside of school, like that was it. I mean, I played baseball, but nothing that would, you know, groom me to be an entrepreneur outside of seeing my father.
So I do think that seeing or witnessing somebody as thriving in their own business is definitely a huge motivator because all right, you've seen it's been tested and proven. You
Yeah.
witnessed it. Um, but like for me, I don't think I was really put in anything specifically that's tailored like this is what you're going to learn from this program. But
Mhm.
I will want to say like one thing that I was kind of forced to do by my parents. I'll use that word
Yeah.
force loosely. Was to run the video at my church. So
Oh,
when I
dope.
grew up, um, at our church, they did like a really big production for like the services. We had a 3 camera setup, tripods, 3 different angles. We had the sound booth. We had the somebody in there controlling the mixer, switching from camera to camera, and all of it's being displayed on the TVs. So I remember I was interested in it just because I was like, oh, I wonder how that works. So I remember I started it, and then I wanted to quit maybe like 2 weeks in. My mom wouldn't let me quit. So I ended up doing the cameras for our church for like
Shout out to
maybe
mom,
I know.
right?
Looking back, I'm so happy that she didn't allow me to quit. I ended up doing that for maybe like 5 or 6 years. But the knowledge that I've learned from doing that is what allows me to produce this podcast.
Mm,
The
yeah.
skills that I learned from doing that and witnessing that and learning under, shout out to my guy Kenneth. And he's in media now. He works for a news station, but he taught me all those
Wow.
things of working from transition, having the camera angles a certain way, working with the video files, things like that. Stuff that you would typically have to go to school for. I was able to just witness and learn. Just witnessing and being a part of that production team for free, gives or gave me some skills that translated to this day. And that was 20 plus years ago.
You said that, you know, a lot of those skills you learned growing up, right? From being in the church and stuff like that, and kind of helped you in businesses in the future. Now, when you look at it, look at where you were 10 years ago versus where you are now. What would you say has changed for you mentally?
Whew. 10 years ago, 10 years ago from today, I wasn't even in school, you know, and sometimes I have to step back and let that sink in. Like
Yeah.
within those 10 years, I've gotten those 3 degrees. And like I mentioned earlier, nothing is really special. Nothing's really that special about me to the point where the next person is not able to do that as well. But mentally, it was just like we talked about earlier, man. I want more out of life. In my current circumstances, wasn't going to give me the life that I wanted. And looking back within these 10 years, just the struggles that I went through, like, I talk about it on my other podcast, the Wonderful Life podcast with my wife Brittany. My son, when he was born 14 weeks premature,
Mm.
born at 1 pound. And
Wow.
when he was born, this was my toughest semester teaching. Like, I had overloads. I was teaching like 9 classes that semester. So, and this is back in 2016. So I think even from that situation, I've learned the importance of being disciplined, time management, because, my wife, she had to go stay with our son in the hospital, and this was in another city, hour and a half away. So I would work Monday through Friday, and then on Friday evenings, drive up to Peoria, like I said, an hour and a half away, spend the weekend in the hospital because, we never wanted to leave our son in there by himself. Spend the weekend in the hospital, drive back Sunday night, and teach 9 classes, which is
Man.
almost twice the amount that a normal professor teaches. So within that time, it really taught me how to be disciplined. And like, I felt if I can overcome that situation, everything else is like, everything else just seems so minuscule to the point where, okay, I got to study tonight. Okay, I was dealing with a life threatening situation, a few years back.
Yeah.
So it helps you to put things into perspective. And I think when you lower the stakes of some of the things that you're attempting to do, it helps to alleviate some of that fear that you might have of starting those things. Every person listening to this podcast has gone through something in their life, and you've overcame it if you're still here today. So when you look back over your life and some of the things that you've overcame, starting a business doesn't really seem that
It's not as
difficult.
hard.
Yeah. So it's really about perspective. So I would say within those 10 years, perspective, discipline was probably the most important things that helped me and will continue to help me going forward. So I mean, like, even over these past 10 years, that's one of the major lessons that I've learned. But even looking at your entire life, going back further
Yeah.
than just those 10 years, and you mentioned your upbringing, what do you think separates you from others who grew up in the similar environment, similar circumstances? You know, how have you been able to succeed when statistically, so many other people don't?
Yeah. I think it's a matter of seeing where you're at now in your current situation and seeing where you want to be. And I say that loosely because like some people aren't able to see past their current situation or problems, and they can't see past their environment, right? I was fortunate enough to be able to look past that and say, okay,
Mhm.
this is where I want to be, and what actions or what steps can I take today to kind of get me to the next step. So I think that was real important for me. And a lot of it came from me just having a support system around me. And I
Mhm.
think, for some people who have similar backgrounds or similar situations, sometimes they lack just the support, right? Because oftentimes we can get, you know, lazy or not motivated or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But if you got people around you who's constantly motivating you and pushing you to accomplish those goals, then it's easier to kind of push forward. So I'll give you an example. Like for me, like going to college, I'm the first person in my immediate family to go off to college, right? And that was a big step. So for me, even applying to college and thinking about going, I had family members motivating me and pushing me like, yo, you can do it, keep going, or or those times where I was in college. And then I'm like, yo, I don't even know if I want to do this, right? They were always in my ear, like, man, you got to keep going. You got to do this for the family. So those outside external motivations is what kept me going forward.
Did that ever put a lot of pressure on you though, with being the first going to the college
Um,
and
it
living up to the family's expectations?
Yeah, I would say yeah, it did, and I don't think they did it intentionally, but it's just them being proud. Because I mean, it it did, man. And now that I think about it, it did put a lot of pressure on because I was like, yo, if I fail, does this mess up the family legacy? Does it mess it up, or like would they just say, well, since he failed, it must not be for us?
Mm.
But since I was able to, graduate or whatever, I mean, since then I had my younger cousins go away to college to the exact same college I went to.
Mm-hmm.
My younger brother went off to college. He went to the same university that I went to my freshman and sophomore year. Uh, so, I mean, in a sense, man, it was a lot of motivation. I mean, a lot of pressure. But if it wasn't for that pressure, I don't think I could have pushed forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned something earlier while you were just talking about that, that a lot of people have a hard time seeing past their current circumstances, but you were able
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Now, in your opinion, why do you think that some people have that hard time seeing past their current circumstances?
I think it's hard for people to see past what they don't know. If you're trying to, get to, go to college or whatever. I mean, if no one in your immediate circle ever went to college in your high school or, your surroundings don't promote it, how do you know how to get to college? But I think it's you just have to want more, right? Especially living in like today's era in 2020, like the internet is at our disposal. So anything that you don't know, you can pretty much for the most part Google it, right? On how to do things or what's the easiest way to do X, Y, and Z. Um, but I just think it's all a matter of the individual and how bad do they really want it.
Hmm.
But that's just my own perspective. But for you, what do you think is the reason why people can't see past it?
I think it is exactly like you said. It's that fear of the unknown. And I heard that I was listening to a TED talk a few weeks back, and I remember the lady saying she was a psychologist, and she was saying that our minds are designed to stop us from doing things that can cause us harm, whether that's emotional or physical harm. Like, even going back to like our example on the treadmill, when you're running, your mind's like, you need to stop. Your legs are starting to tighten up, but you can
Yeah,
keep pushing forward. So our minds are telling us, like, hey, this might hurt you, stop. And I think the same like with that the unknowns. If I don't know anything about college, I've never been to college, my mind might be telling me, you can't do that. You don't know anybody who's done that. There
yeah,
aren't people from your background, your high school, that went to college. So your mind's trying to protect you. And I think sometimes that fear of the unknown is what really keeps people from moving forward. And I think that's just what it is, and that's what separates some people. It's a lot of people who are talented, that never make it to those professional leagues. But one thing that I've learned from listening to a lot of trainers, people who do these skills academies with pro athletes, is that you have to, once you get to a position, you have to work like you're not where you're at to stay where you are and to push yourself to go further. There's people like Kevin Durant that was talking about specifically from this trainer. He said like he works out like he's still trying to make it to the league, and he's
mm,
one of the best players in the game.
yeah,
And that's the same thing that I want to do. As an educator, I want to work like I'm fresh in the game, and that's what's going to keep me sharp. Because if
mm,
you get complacent, as we've been talking about for numerous episodes, then you stop putting that effort in. And when you stop putting that effort in, maybe you become less effective. As you become less effective, you're not really doing your job to the best of your ability. You're not reaching your potential. So that's the thing for me. Like I heard this quote from Evan Carmichael. He has a YouTube channel. He does a lot of motivational stuff. And he says that as humans, we're built to serve. He says some people are built to serve the 25 people nearest them. Some people are built to serve the world. I want to be one of those individuals that are built to serve the world. I want to get to a point where I'm able to impact the lives of others and in a greater way. And I think that's one of my biggest motivators, and my wife's as well. And I think when you surround yourself with people who want the same things out of life that you do or more, it makes it easier to go out and achieve those things. Personally, that's just my personal belief.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and sometimes it's hard to surround yourself with the right people if you're in a circumstance or a community that is underserved, under resourced,
hmm,
don't have all those right things. But I think both of us are a testament to you can overcome your circumstances.
yeah.
Don't never let your current circumstances dictate what your future holds.
I agree, man. And look, I'm not the smartest person in the world.
Yeah.
right? And I always go back to that Will Smith quote. Like, I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the most handsome person. But one thing I can probably pride myself on is my work ethic. I
Mm-hmm.
will always outwork anybody next to me, or at least try to. And I think that right there alone is kind of what separates me from people with similar situations.
I think your work ethic is probably one of the most important attributes that you can have that's going to lead you to success. And I think it's just been evident with a lot of the people who are successful. And for me, I always just go to athletes just because I think that's at the pinnacle of something that you train for your entire life and you make it to those professional leagues. So one of the things that I remember from Kobe Bryant is he always says he's always going to be the first one in the gym. He's going to be the last one out the gym, and one to constantly push himself, but then also to show the people around like there's nobody that's going to outwork me, and this is what it takes to get to the level that I'm at. Are you willing to accept the challenge? And I think I want to do, like you mentioned, the same thing for my son. Like I want to show him like this is what it takes to get to these levels. Like you got to be diligent. You got to be willing to put that work in. It's going to take those long hours. A lot of people aren't going to see the struggles.
Yeah.
A lot of people are only going to see the highlights.
Yeah.
But what's going to keep you working at 2 o'clock in the morning while everybody else is asleep?
Yeah.
What's
And
going
I
to
think
keep
I
you
think
doing that?
and I think you mentioned it on one of our other episodes is you got to kind of make the reason why you're doing something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah.
You got to have that why. Because if I remember Inky Johnson said, if you make the why about something else, you're gonna fail. So you're gonna fail every time because it's not about you. So you'll
Hmm.
give up as soon as you're hit with any type of adversity.
Right.
But if you make the why bigger than you, then you have something bigger to reach for. So I think that's important is to make sure whatever your why is, it can't be material.
Hmm.
It has to be something that's internal that's going to keep lighting that fire every time it goes out.
I think that's a really good place for us to stop because I mean I think this has been filled with a lot of good information. But one
Yeah.
thing that I will challenge our listeners and our viewers to is if you haven't already determined what your why is, determine that, figure that out. And that's not going to be something that, okay, this is my why. You get new. This is something that you really do have to spend some time. You have to find out like the inner workings of yourself to say like, okay, this is what's going to drive me from this point out. And then once you get that, write it down and then stick to it.
And this has been another episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. Again, I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co host, Dr. John Devereaux. And whatever you're listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.